The stars above Earth burned cold and distant, indifferent witnesses to the war that had scorched the planet below. Smoke still curled from the ruins of shattered cities, drifting like ghostly tendrils over silent concrete bones. The once proud cradle of humanity had become a mausoleum, sterilized by the Galactic Council's crusade for order. They had called it a necessary purge, surgical, efficient, justified. Admiral Kaler of the Varn Dominion stood at the edge of a scorched ridge, overlooking what used to be a human military installation. His black-plated armor hummed faintly with kinetic shielding, but there was no danger here anymore. The last resistance cell had fallen 2 cycles ago. Scouting drones had swept the debris fields, heat and biosignature scans run 6 times over. Earth was finished. Final sweep report confirms. A subordinate reported. No remaining combatants. All zones are secure. Kaler nodded, tapping a Talon finger against his wrist panel. Begin exfiltration protocols. Notify the Council. Operation Solstice is complete. Overhead, the sky split briefly as a Council warship blinked out of the atmosphere. In its wake, silence settled across the ruin like a death shroud. Behind Kaler, squads of alien infantry scavenged for tech remnants, uploading data and dismantling weapon caches. None of them noticed a faint flicker of movement beneath the twisted steel girders 50 meters away. No sensor pinged. No alarm blared. Buried beneath the rubble, half-conscious and slick with dried blood, Sergeant Calendrax exhaled slowly through cracked lips. They missed him. His rifle lay cradled against his chest, wrapped in shredded camouflage netting and scorched cloth. The barrel was warped. The scope was cracked. But it would shoot. He would make it shoot. His left leg was crushed beneath a steel beam, nerves screaming every time he moved. His right arm was gashed from wrist to elbow. Infection was setting in. The aliens had assumed he was dead. Logical, given the cratered state of his sniper nest. But logic, Callan knew, was a poor substitute for paranoia. That mistake had cost his team everything. He counted breaths. 6 seconds in. For seconds out. It kept the pain at bay. It kept the anger focused. Spectre Zero. That was the name of his squad. Ghost in the field. No records. No insignia. Ghost died quietly, but not him. Not yet. Callan had watched his brothers and sisters and arms vaporized by orbital fire. He'd heard the last screams in his comms as alien hunter drones cut them down. The war was over, the Council believed. Earth was pacified. A footnote in the larger conquest of what they called the lesser civilizations. He shifted his weight, gritting his teeth until his molars ground. His fingers moved with muscle memory, checking the last 2 armor-piercing rounds in his rifle's mag. He had no food, no water, and no med supplies. But he had ammunition. And hate. Enough of both to make the Council regret the oversight. He lay still as a squad of Varn infantry marched by, their exosuits clanking faintly on rubble. They didn't see him. The gilly shroud blended seamlessly with the broken earth. When they passed, Callan finally let his breath release. His HUD flickered on and off, cracked from the blast. He blinked commands manually, pulling up a crude local map. Power to his comms was dead, but he marked the patrol's movement anyway, out of habit. Somewhere in the numb ache of his thoughts, he considered the irony. They'd won the war. Yet he remained alive in the shadow of their victory. Forgotten, dismissed. That was their final mistake. Callan began to crawl. Every inch was agony. Debris sliced at him, and his leg dragged uselessly behind. He moved like a serpent, silent, patient, vengeful. In the charred ruins of a military vehicle, he found a cracked medkit. The coagulant foam burned like fire when he injected it into his wounds, but it kept him from bleeding out. He took painkillers. He rewrapped his fingers. Then he waited. The sun set slowly over the cratered skyline, casting long shadows across a world robbed of its defiance. Alien floodlights clicked on in the distance, bathing the area in pale blue. Drones whirred overhead like insects. One passed within 10 meters of him and never slowed. By nightfall, Callan had reached higher ground. The skeleton of an office building that had once overseen a command center. The vantage point still stood. Barely. Its jagged edge gave him sight lines across a wide sector. He settled in among the bones and dust, watching, learning. Below, The aliens moved like victors, too relaxed, too complacent. A commander barked orders. Technicians repaired equipment. Nobody watched the shadows. Nobody feared them anymore. Callan adjusted his rifle. He had no delusions of victory. He would die here, probably within the week. But before that happened, he would remind them who they had tried to erase. Not by screaming, not with banners or speeches, but with precision, with patience, with single shots that echoed through their ranks like whispers of a forgotten ghost. His finger hovered over the trigger. The crosshairs settled on the alien commander's throat. Spectre Zero never missed, and neither would he. The first shot didn't echo. It whispered, a perfect spiral of death that slipped through the throat of the Varn commander like a scalpel through silk. He fell mid-command, gurgling on blood and disbelief as the light left his luminous yellow eyes. Chaos erupted instantly. Troopers scrambled for cover, their rifles whirring to life, scanning rooftops with wide arcs of plasma light. But the bullet had come from nowhere. No muzzle flash, no sound, only the soft slump of a body collapsing into dirt. Callan Drax was already gone. He moved like vapor through the skeletal remains of the city, dragging his injured leg through corridors of shadow. He'd memorized every route in the zone during Earth's final defense. Every drainage duct, every broken staircase, every collapsed hallway. The aliens might have razed the cities, but their arrogance had left the bones behind. Bones that still remembered how to shelter a ghost. 3 hours later, while the aliens were still combing rooftops with frustration and fury, another Varn officer bled out against a shattered wall. This one was struck mid-transmission. The shot punched through the communication, a ray on his shoulder, and drilled into his spine. By the time the rest of his team found him, the body was still warm and the uplink was fried. No witness, no trail. The Council had expected resistance to die with Earth's armies. They hadn't accounted for Callan, nor the discipline carved into his soul through years of sniper doctrine. One shot, one move, one ghost. In the underbelly of fallen high-rise, he patched himself again with what little remained in the medkit. His fingers shook as he stitched the gash on his side, lips pressed into a line so thin it nearly vanished. Every movement sent fire licking up his nerves. But he didn't scream. Screaming was for the dying. He wasn't ready yet. He kept a journal in a cracked datapad salvaged from an alien corpse. Entries typed in broken sentences, jagged thoughts. Not for posterity. For control. For sanity. Second kill. Officer class. Center of mass. No wasted motion. Wind 3 knots southwest. Distance 421 meters. Ammo down to 6 rounds. Pain spreading in hip. No infection yet. Water scavenged from filter unit, non-lethal. I'm still here. Above ground, the aliens grew unsettled. The Varn weren't just soldiers. They were conquerors, used to resistance crumbling at the sight of orbital fire. But now their patrols came back with one less trooper. Or didn't come back at all. They increased sweep zones, reinforced forward posts. Drones flew thicker over sectors once thought pacified, and Callan adapted. He began laying traps, improvised explosives cobbled from alien plasma cells and Earth's leftover tech. Not for wide destruction. Precision again. A fuel tank, a corner of a barracks, a comms node. Each time, the explosion left no pattern. One looked like a power surge, another like structural fatigue. He even left the collapsed surveillance tower appearing, as if it had buckled under its own weight. The illusion mattered. Confusion bred fear. Fear slowed them down. He studied their patterns like a scientist dissects an organism. Alien squads moved in predictable formations. They trusted their tech too much. Thermal scans, motion sensors, AI-assisted terrain mapping. But Callan wasn't noise. He was silence. Cold. Patient. Watching from cracks in the earth. From behind burned-out transports and hollowed-out statues of forgotten leaders. He scavenged a functioning alien scope and grafted it to his rifle. Calibrating it took hours. But once done, he could see farther, track better, kill more efficiently. Then came the fourth kill, different from the others. He'd tracked this one for days. A tall alien sergeant with a habit of breaking formation to berate his troops, his voice carrying across broken plazas like a whip. Callan waited. Let him walk the same path 3 times. On the 4th, he left the corpse cooling in the dust, but not without leaving a message. On the wall behind the body, drawn in ash and smear blood, he painted a skull over a crosshair. Crude, unmistakable. Human. It spread faster than he anticipated. 2 days later, in another zone, graffiti appeared in the same symbol. Not his doing. Human survivors had seen it, copied it, whispered about it. The ghost. A sniper who couldn't be seen, couldn't be heard, but always struck true. Someone still fighting. Someone proving the council wasn't omnipotent. Callan watched the rumors spiral from the dark. He didn't claim them, didn't feed them, but he didn't deny them either. Symbols had power. Legends could move people where orders couldn't. If his presence stirred fear in the enemy and hope in the scattered bones of his people, so be it. Still, he didn't allow himself to believe in the myth. This was revenge, not entirely. It was correction. The council thought humanity would forget how to kill when their satellites fell. They thought fire would erase instinct. But Callan had learned in the cold silence of sniper training that war wasn't noise. It was patience, steel, and intent. And now they were teaching him something new, how fragile empires truly were. Late one night, tucked into the second floor of a bombed-out medical facility, he sighted an alien technician working on a relay tower. No guards, no armor, vulnerable. His finger hovered over the trigger. Then he lowered the rifle. Killing the technician would spark repairs, replacements, guard rotations. But letting him live, letting him transmit corrupted coordinates Callan had tampered with earlier, that would scramble command channel for hours. A better kill. He leaned back into the shadows and listened to the transmission go live. The voice on the alien channel was clipped, irritated, perfect. His breath slowed, the pain in his body now a quiet throb, manageable. Beneath the agony, beneath the weariness, something else pulsed. Rhythm, purpose. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was composing something. A requiem for the council. The sniper's presence was no longer rumor. It was disruption. A pattern of calculated violence threaded through the alien command logs, each death too precise to be chance. Patrol captains filed daily reports stained with fear. Soldiers began speaking in hushed voices. Not about a human rebellion, but about a phantom. A single ghost with a rifle and vengeance carved into his bones. Callan watched the fear blossom, like rot in the Varn ranks. He saw in the eyes of soldiers who flinched at the wind, who snapped their rifles toward shadows. One even discharged into a pile of rubble, convinced it was a trap. There were no bodies, no blood, just nerves unraveling. He had spent weeks learning how they thought. Now he was unmaking that thinking, one bullet at a time. At night, he stalked through corridors of ash and silence, planting sonic decoys and triggering old Earth alarms in empty zones. Some he paired with ancient Earth music, static-laced broadcasts of distorted piano or human voices speaking long-dead languages. To the aliens, it was madness. To Callan, it was a language of disquiet. A patrol once arrived at a relay tower only to find it looping a woman's voice saying, "Target acquired," over and over in a calm, emotionless tone. They fled. He didn't laugh. There was no room for joy, but there was a grim satisfaction in the alien reports he scavenged. One described him as a psychological hazard. Another referred to him as the anomaly. But the one that mattered most came from a Varn general whose message was intercepted by a dying human rebel and relayed through a crumbling comm beacon. This is not a soldier. This is a predator. Callan wore the words like a mantle. His body was failing faster now. The infection he'd suppressed with sheer what was gaining ground. His leg burned hot and swollen beneath scavenged bandages. Sleep came in short, vicious snatches, interrupted by phantom pain and remembered screams. Yet still he hunted. He began targeting supply lines, watching from elevated ruins as dropships offloaded crates of plasma cells and synthetic rations. He would let them begin their operations before lancing through a power unit or rupturing a coolant tank. Explosions followed. Confusion. Retreat. The aliens began assigning more troops to guard duties. Fewer were available for patrols. Their control slipped millimeter by millimeter. He watched it all from the dark with fevered eyes, each victory keeping his body moving despite itself. He stopped checking his wounds. There was no point. He wasn't healing. He was hollowing. But that hollow was filling with something more dangerous than blood. Purpose. The council responded with escalation. They dispatched Commander Virex, a cold-eyed tactician from the SYTH delegation, to Earth. Known for dismantling entire rebellions with surgical brutality, Virex made his presence known with a public execution of human prisoners, broadcast on every alien channel in Earth's orbit. No context, just pain. Callan watched the broadcast from the ruins of an observatory. He didn't react. He didn't scream. He simply turned the volume down and began planning. Virex would become his next objective. Not immediately. He was too well guarded. But Callan began peeling away the layers. He tracked Virex's logistics officers, killed 2 and maimed a 3rd, then moved on to comm relays, severed the general's access to forward recon data, confused his timing, forced him to send convoys blind. The psychological war intensified. The sniper mark, the skull and the crosshair, now appeared in 3 different zones Callan had never visited. Other humans were taking up the symbol. Not snipers, not trained, but angry, inspired. His myth was spreading faster than his bullets. Aliens began defecting. Not many, not the elite, but enough. Some Varn soldiers simply stopped showing up at their posts. Others destroyed their weapons and vanished. One squad even left a surrender broadcast playing on a loop before disappearing entirely into the wastelands. The Council's tight control was fragmenting. And still Callan pushed forward. He heard them talk about him on intercepted comms, about the Earthshade, about the killer that walks between seconds. They guessed he was augmented, genetically enhanced. They were wrong. He was just angry. One night, on the edge of Sector 9, he came face to face with a young human woman, barely 20, covered in dust and wielding a salvaged alien rifle. She froze. He didn't. She raised her hands. "Are you the ghost?" Callan didn't answer, but he didn't shoot either. "People are saying you're more than one person," she said quietly. "They think you're some kind of weapon we buried and forgot." He let the silence stretch. "We've started fighting again," she said. "Because of you." Callan blinked slowly, as if trying to reconcile what her words meant to him. He hadn't meant to lead anyone, but now people were following. Before he left, he handed her 2 of his precious rounds and pointed toward a broken radio tower. No words, just intention. That night, he made another kill, one of Virex's senior logistics minds. The alien's head exploded mid-speech during a strategy briefing. Panic swept through the camp. Virex ordered all forces into lockdown. Too late. The cracks had become fractures. Callan crawled back into the shadows, blood leaking from beneath his armor, his lungs rasping like paper. He leaned against the wall of a fallen monument and stared up at the stars. He didn't need to win. He just needed the machine to grind itself to death trying to catch him. The Council had made one mistake. They left a human alive, and he was teaching them what that meant. The Galactic Council's flagship descended to the ashen sky like a sanctified blade, casting a long metallic shadow over the crumbling remnants of Earth's last capital. Its reflective hull gleamed despite the haze, a show of dominance polished for the cameras. This wasn't a tactical deployment. It was theater, a statement. Commander Virex had orchestrated every detail to restore the illusion of order. Soldiers stood in rigid formations, Mets lined the perimeter with gleaming cannons at the ready, and a stage had been erected in the heart of the city's corpse, complete with broadcast drones orbiting like vultures. But Callan Drax had also made preparations. From the top floor of a partially collapsed skyscraper over a kilometer away, he adjusted the crude sling binding his fractured ribs and wiped congealed blood from his eyes. The pain was constant now, white-hot in his hip, icy in his leg. Breathing felt like dragging razors through his lungs. His body was all but finished, but it didn't matter. Not anymore. His rifle rested atop a shattered window frame, an amalgam of salvaged alien optics fused with the long barrel of his earth-forged weapon. It had been his companion, his instrument, his final truth. This shot would be its purpose fulfilled. He'd scouted this building for 3 days, dragging himself through rubble and sewage, marking wind vectors and measuring angles by hand. His eyes were glassy from fever, but his aim was clean, still, singular. Through the lens, he saw Virex emerge beneath the flagship's looming presence. The alien commander wore ceremonial armor lacquered in obsidian and gold, his face expressionless, voice amplified by translation tech to echo in 6 languages. He spoke of cleansing, of control, of civilization imposed through necessary cruelty. He spoke to the galaxy, to the council, to the rebels still hiding in their holes. But he didn't speak to Callan. Callan exhaled, a slow, measured breath that quieted his heartbeat and silenced the war in his veins. His finger found the trigger, pressed until resistance vanished, and released everything in a single crack of destiny. The sound vanished before it could be heard, but the bullet did not. Virex staggered mid-sentence, blinking in confusion as blood erupted from the base of his throat. His ceremonial robes darkened in a rush of crimson as he collapsed to his knees, then fell forward, twitching. His staff rushed in too late, too stunned to speak. The broadcast caught every second. For 3 heartbeats, the plaza was silent. Then the panic hit. Troopers scrambled to their posts, shouting over one another. Shields flared to maximum. Mechs rotated to skin buildings in every direction. Drones swarmed into the sky, seeking the impossible, the sniper who had just murdered their strongest symbol. But Callan was already gone. He dragged himself backward, through the blackened stairwell, down into the creaking bones of the tower. Blood trailed behind him in thick, dark smears. He moved without sound, without urgency. The world above him was unraveling. He'd done what he came to do. The people would carry the rest. He made it to a drainage corridor deep beneath the street and collapsed behind a pile of rubble. Every breath felt like drowning. His vision flickered, pulse barely ticking against his neck. He fumbled for his datapad and typed one final message with fingers that barely obeyed him. Keep your finger on the trigger. A call, a warning, a seed. He leaned back against the cold stone and looked up into the dark ceiling, as if trying to see the stars one last time. But there was only concrete, soot and silence. He didn't die in anger. Not anymore. He died in certainty. 2 days passed before anyone found him. A team of young humans, rebel scouts with alien rifles and old Earth tags stitched to their armor, found his body thanks to the datapad's weak emergency signal. They approached with reverence, as if unsure if he might rise again, rifle in hand. But he was still. Sergeant Callan Drax, the ghost of Earth, the myth who haunted the Varn's every breath, had finally laid down his rifle. They buried him beneath the ruins of the old metro tunnels. Not with ceremony. Callan had hated ceremony, but with silence. His rifle was placed atop the grave, cleaned and polished, its barrel pointing skyward. Word of Virex's death traveled across the stars like wildfire. The council denied it at first, called it a deep fake, then blamed human propaganda. But the broadcast had been real. Too real. Entire occupied sectors erupted into resistance within days. Human militias once thought extinct struck back with renewed fury. Alien units began deserting in groups. Varn commanders refused deployment to Earth. The sniper's mark appeared everywhere now. Painted in ash, carved into walls, stitched into jackets. A skull and a crosshair. It didn't matter that he was dead. In death, he had become what the council feared most, an idea they couldn't kill. A reminder that humanity's extinction had never been guaranteed, only delayed. Years later, when Earth was free, they built a monument over the metro tunnels. It wasn't grand. It didn't carry his name. It was a simple sculpture, a rifle resting on a block of fused rubble, beneath the sniper's mark etched in bronze. At its base, a small plaque held the only words that mattered. The council's mistake wasn't leaving him alive. It was believing humans die quietly,